Well, yeah, that's the first step. That's good. Well, that's good. That's the first step. Nope, just read it.
I'm the chair. That's a big pay cut, some chairs. Sit more, I don't want. We don't want to stay.
For your adjusting.
Totally different. Did you eat Kingston? I did. I love these conversations. You will. Yeah. Franchising business, that involves money coming back to us. It should. It's great. We just can't. Just as small. And mind you, we did steal their strategic set up very similar to the Kingston because Fred wrote this as well. So. She will, I think, initially started in I think so. I think Ron is going to be done.
I was going to say, I'm assuming this probably works too. Is this Janet's? Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. Superintendent, were those lights for me? I feel like I'm going to be interrogated. It was a guy that looked just like me. It was. Thanks for coming out. My name's Councillor Dave, and on behalf of Councillor Janet Haslett-Thiel, thanks for joining us this evening, and a wave for all the people that are joining us online. And welcome to Maple Grove United Church. Further to some comments that we received as the part of the welcoming committee, no, this isn't a meeting on Midtown. And let's not go there tonight. We're happy to have one specifically for that at a later time. Janet and I had a session with HRPS last month at Town Hall to address a number of issues that had been expressed by our community. This evening's session was organized as a result of further concerns caused by recent events. If you're not receiving our Ward 3 newsletter to keep you up to date, there are a few clipboards making the rounds, or they will be once they're removed from the front pew. Please sign up if you're interested in receiving updates. We just need your name and email. And over to you, Councillor Janet.
Good evening. It's wonderful to see everybody come out and show their commitment to learning more about the police services. So tonight's agenda is there, and we're going to, we've got several things to cover with you tonight. One is we have the pleasure of having the chair of the Police Services Board and Regional and Town Councillor Jeff Knoll with us tonight. He's going to talk to you a little bit about the Police Services Board to give you a broader picture of what they do. Superintendent Sandy is going to come up, and he is going to introduce his team that have been helping us immensely. We have one little announcement to make. It's a fairly big announcement, actually, around some funding, and then we will have a Q&A. Let me, with my pleasure, thank Councillor Knoll for taking the time out of his busy schedule to join us. Councillor Knoll's been a councillor for 24 years. Did I get that right? Almost, okay, 23 and a quarter. He's getting up there. And he's been a member of almost all the committees on council. He has been just re-elected as the chair of the Police Services Board, so he has a wealth of knowledge about them. And so, Jeff, thank you for coming, and the podium is yours.
Thanks, Janet, and thanks for granting my visa to come to Ward 3. It's always a pleasure to visit this part of town, and I'm so pleased to be here tonight to tell you a little bit about the Halton Police Board and what our role is in public safety in Halton Region. So before I go further, can you take out your hymnals and go to hymn number 637? And all together now? No. So yes, I am chair of the Police Services Board, and I've been on the board for 12 years, and I've had the great pleasure of being part of I guess the steerage of the police services in Halton Region, which continue to be amongst the best, if not the best police service in Halton or in Canada. Obviously, it's the best at Halton, what am I saying? But it certainly it is the best or amongst the best in Canada, and that is empirically proven by our crime statistics and by the services that we deliver in the community. Now, sometimes it doesn't look like that when you have circumstances like you've experienced in this neighborhood recently, but it's unfortunate it's a blip in radar, and it's a very serious blip, and my friends from the service are going to talk a little bit about what we're doing and what the current circumstances are. But please understand that your Police Services Board, in our capacity as the overarching employer of the police in Halton Region, as well as the policy development arm, we are making sure that all of our actions support what the community requires to get the greatest degree of public safety possible in the community. And then, of course, we get the pleasure of making those rules, and these folks actually get to run out and do the job. So thank you to them for that. We also developed the 4-year strategic plan for the police board, and that strategic plan sets out what our priorities are. Now, just to set the context a little bit here, we set policy, and that means that we determine what the priorities are. We create the budget for the police service, we hire the chief, we evaluate the chief, we evaluate the service, and we have the civilian governance oversight over the police board. But we do not We do not have any influence over charges and parking tickets. So all you who asked me to fix your parking tickets, I'm sorry I can't do that tonight. But that is solely the gamut of the police. They have the sole authority outside of the board's purview to investigate and press charges as necessary. We, however, set the standards, and our strategic plan is about to be approved at the end of February, and it includes some very clear metrics about what the board's expectations are on your behalf in terms of increasing even more than we have today the public safety here in Halton Region. And it includes very specific details around increasing our clearance rate, and the clearance rate is how the speed in which, or the success in which a criminal activity goes from charges to prosecution to clearance or completion. So we've set these new goals in the context of where we are today in society. Crime has gone up, there's no question. It's gone up Canada-wide, and it certainly, Halton has not escaped what has been a trend that has happened since the pandemic. And I know that Sergeant Wright, I think, has some statistics in one of his slide decks to talk about that. But that doesn't give anybody any great solace, obviously. Statistics aren't going to protect you in your homes. Now, I know that the other part that we're doing is we are increasing, as a board, we're increasing the number of feet on the street. So we have, in the past couple months, we actually had our budget approved that the board put forward, which includes increasing the number of police officers in Halton Region. So we are actually increasing the number of officers on the street, both to deal with the trends around increased crime, but also to address the growth that we are experiencing across Halton Region and right here at Oakville. At our last board meeting, we actually had a conversation, and I need a drink of water. We actually had a conversation about Ward 3 and the recent spat of crime that has happened in this community, and the board has made it clear to the service that we're looking for solutions and looking for opportunities to deal with that. Now, the good news is, and I think you'll hear this later on, that one of the individuals that was involved has been found and arrested, but still, that's not the end of the story. There's still a whole justice system piece that has to come into play. Our budget increase, is going to allow for the hiring of an additional, I believe it's 29 new officers to complement our approximately 750 sworn officers today. So it's a significant increase. And our plan is to increase each year going forward to try to catch up both with crime statistics as well as the growth of the community. So you're most interested in hearing from the guys with the guns and the badges, because they're the ones that are going to give you some of the answers that you're looking for. But I do want to say thank you for taking interest and thank you for being here this evening. It's very important to have these community engagements. I'm going to be taking careful notes to take back to my colleagues as well from your questions. And I'll be evaluating each one of them. No, I'm not kidding. Just kidding. That's not my job. The chief evaluates them. But I'm very interested in hear some of your comments. And I'm very grateful to your counselors, Janet and Dave, for inviting me to talk to you tonight, because I really love talking about the police board so people actually know what we do. We're sort of the hidden gem of the police service, I like to call ourselves. Probably not. But once again, thank you to Dave and Janet. They are on this. Let me tell you, I hear about this from them regularly. Every time I bump into one of them at council or by email, I'm hearing about one of these issues, and they're really just saying, like, keep on your service to make sure that they're doing the job. So I want to thank them for staying on top of me on this issue, and you're well served by your counselors. So with that, I will be happy to take questions at the end of the night as well if you have any questions about the Police Service Board. And I would love it if you had some questions about the Police Service Board, but I think you're most interested in their story. Thank you very much, everybody.
So it's my pleasure to bring to the podium Superintendent Jeff Sandy, and he will introduce his team. And Superintendent, we are very grateful for you to be here tonight.
So a thank you to Janet and David, and certainly a thank you to all of you. I can tell you that these engagements that we go to with the command team, as well as any of our staff that are involved in this priority in terms of crime trends, is very important that we actually have the opportunity to meet and have great discussions, because, you know, I'll take you back to a famous Peelian principle. It says that the public are the police and the police are the public. And any time that we are going to strategically attack or address a certain crime trend or priority population, it is important to note that we do that as a team, as a collective. And it's not just the police service. We depend on the members of the public to bring things forward to us so that we can act on it, so that we can strategically address and solve problems that are happening in your neighborhoods. And I would say thank you at the outset to all of you for providing us that opportunity. Certainly, I'll be here to take questions after Detective Sergeant Wright's presentation and engage in some discussion with you. But I will tell you that we feel quite supported by the Police Services Board and Chair Knoll, as well as our Chief Tanner and Deputy Chief Roger Wilkie, who cannot be here tonight. But we derive in 2 District a phenomenal amount of support from them in moving forward with our initiatives. I will certainly share with you this evening, in response to the B&E or break and enter problems that you've experienced in your neighborhoods, what our holistic approach has been and how we have applied the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan to tackle that problem, and share some successes we've had out of that with you, but also share with you some of our ongoing pieces utilizing that Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan of how we will continue to derive success, not just for your neighborhood, but other neighborhoods in Oakville. We are passionate about tackling these problems with you. You know, we understand that certainly if we had family, you know, and I have family that live in this region, that these are shocking crimes that take place. And we absolutely, 100%, not just us, but all of the constables, the sworn and civilian members that work in 2 District, take it to heart that we are here to help you and solve these problems with you. And so this is an important step for us tonight to do that. Tonight I've brought with me several members of my team. Inspector Crystal Dodds is my operations inspector for the district. Detective Sergeant Ron Wright is in charge of our Criminal Investigations Bureau, and he will take you through tonight a bit of a presentation dealing particularly with some of the questions you had, hoping to answer some of those for you. And then I brought along Acting Staff Sergeant Ryan Smith, who runs our Community Mobilization Bureau. And I think it's important to have all of these perspectives at the table with you tonight, because while you may hear about investigations, we have to keep in mind that, you know, break and enters are not the only problem that we're addressing in policing within this district. So mental health concerns, priority populations, other crime trends, we have to attack those holistically and not just as a blip on the screen. And so it's important that you'll hear about some of the upstream interventions that we're also going to employ as we tackle these problems strategically with you. So with that, I'll keep my other comments and hold them back for our discussion. But certainly it's great to be here with you tonight, and I look forward to the discussion and the engagement, as I always do, because there's lots for us to learn in these engagements as well. We're not just here to tell a story, but to also listen and address some of the concerns that you have, for sure. So with that, I will thank Janet and Dave again, and I'll turn it over to Detective Sergeant Wright to take you through a bit of a presentation. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Probably just talk, and if need be, I can.
They're streaming, you have to use the
Perfect, thank you. So good evening, everyone. I'm Ron Wright. I am in charge of our Criminal Investigations Bureau in Oakville. So this presentation, we're going to focus primarily on residential break and enters, and we'll also do a little bit on auto theft. So just before we get into it, I do think it's important just to touch upon the different criminal offenses that my office investigates. Certainly a series of different property and person-style crimes, everything from assaults, uttering threats, sexual extortions. We investigate all deaths, including overdoses, robberies, thefts, hate crimes, drug trafficking, so certainly a slew of different criminal investigations. We spend a lot of time on missing persons, which is not necessarily a criminal investigation, but something certainly that takes up a fair bit of our time. So I know it's a little bit tough to see some of the numbers, so I'll just read them out and highlight them here for you. So, where are we currently with our crime rate? As Chair Null indicated, crime is certainly on the rise, and we can certainly see some of the numbers. So in 2021 and 2022, we saw quite a significant increase in the crime rate in Halton. We went up 17.7% in 2021 and almost 30% last year. We also see that our closest neighbors, Peel, York, Toronto, also had quite a significant increase in crime in the past few years. So that equates for us, excluding traffic data, about 15,000 criminal offenses last year. So I'll go into a few of the numbers here and explain some of this data. So we have something called a crime severity index. So what's important by this, and I'll just say that this data and these terms come from Stats Canada, so it's universal across Canada in terms of how criminal stats are tracked and how they're presented. So a crime severity index, or a CSI, measures the volume of crime, but also the severity of crime. So each criminal offense is given a number, a numerical number, based on its severity, and they couple that with the increase in crime to come up with a number. So the lower the number is really the safer the region. So you can see where Halton compares to some of our counterparts here, and certainly we've maintained a very low CSI for a number of years, actually the lowest in all of Canada, and we still maintain a very low CSI. It is on the rise as we see a rise in crime rate, but still we can say, relatively speaking, that we are a very safe place to live. Now, I say that for context and perspective. Certainly, being a victim of a crime, I'm not trying to diminish the impact that crime has. However, what's important to know is that, a lot of these things that we're going to be discussing tonight is multi-jurisdictional. There are no borders for these criminals that are coming into Oakville and the rest of Halton to commit crime. So it is important to actually pay attention to what's happening around us as well, to understand what's happening here. The second category that I just want to introduce is the weighted clearance rate. So as I said, Stats Canada gives a weight or a value to every criminal offense. And part of that weight is assessed based on incarceration rates or how much time you could spend in jail for that offense to actually give it a value or a seriousness. And the clearance rate, as Chair Null had indicated, is basically when a crime happens and we have a suspect, how many of those do we clear off? So how many of those do we solve in the event that we're actually laying a charge? So we've always been extremely high in terms of how much crime do we solve. You can see in 2022 we dipped slightly. Again, this was always a category that we were number one in. We're at about 43% for all crime. We dropped slightly below Durham at 44%. But you can see we're actually solving much more crime as well when we compare it to who's living around us in our other jurisdictions. The final category that I'll just bring up here is the nonviolent clearance rate. So this is really our property crime, our auto theft, other styles of thefts, some of our break and enters. And again, Halton's at 31%, significantly higher than some of our counterparts. So again, I don't bring this up to diminish the impact of crime and victims of crime, but I do for the context that it's important to understand what's happening around us so we can better understand what's happening in our own neighborhood. So this is just another graph, and the orange here is property crime. So we can see from 2016 to 2023, just a graphical representation of crime. And certainly the orange, which is our property crime, has always been the number one driver here in Halton, including Oakville. The blue is violent crime, so that might be a robbery or an assault. And the green is other styles of crime, so that could be an online crime or a crime if someone fails to attend court or something like that. So all to say, the majority of the crime that we're looking at, and certainly what you're experiencing in your community, is property crime. So let's get into the main thing that we're going to discuss tonight, and that's residential break-in enters. So 2017 is in the green, and it goes up to 2023 here in the blue. And this is just a chart showing, over the past, 6 years, what does it look like in your community and in Halton for residential break-in enters. So we certainly see in 2017 and 2018 quite high, certainly a priority offense for us to investigate. We saw obviously a big dip during COVID, and one of our best preventative tips, which was really illustrated via COVID, was that if you appear that your house is occupied, it's often one of the best deterrents. So we know during COVID everyone was at home, and we basically saw residential break-in enters die off completely. As we came out of COVID, we start to see them creep up again. So I put this slide in here because this was predominantly a Ward 3 driven investigation, and this was in 2018. So I was actually part of this investigation as an investigator out driving the car, doing the investigation, and this was a residential property break-and enter investigation. These individuals were smashing rear patio doors, entering a home, going primarily to the master primary bedroom, and targeting all of these things that we keep in our master bedroom. They, over the course of several months, October to March, did hundreds and hundreds throughout the GTA, including Oakville. We recovered about $3 million in stolen property. So I bring this up because what we're seeing now during these low daylight months is residential break-in enters. We're seeing the individuals attend the backyard, smash out our patio door, and attend our bedroom to steal these things. So this is certainly a trend and a crime group that has been impacting this ward in the Oakville community since at least 2018 and much prior to that. So for Ward 3 in 2023, let's have a look at some of the data. There was 58 residential break-in enters last year. The predominant, rear patio door smash. We know when it's a rear patio door smash, we can almost attribute it to a specific group. It's actually the same type of group that was here in 2018 doing the same thing. It's just different people. We also have a fair amount of front door kicks. Front door kick and a rear patio door are organized crews of people that are committing break-in enters. These aren't people that live in Oakville. In fact, these people are typically active across the province, and some, the individuals back in 2018, we arrested 4 of them in that news clip. About 6 months later, 6 more got arrested in Australia. So some of these are global groups. It is organized crime. For Ward 3, we see a bit of a heat map in terms of where we're actually seeing the entries. This is from last month, as we saw 14 entries last month, which we know was a spike. And again, we can kind of see it's in the same heated areas that we typically will see these. So for some context and contrast, this is all of Oakville for residential break-in enters last year. Certainly in our, some of our residential pockets, we are seeing these entries. We are seeing front door kicks, and we're seeing the rear patio door smashes. There we go. So, what do we do? I sometimes get the question, what are the police doing about these? So without getting too technical, some of our strategy is high visibility. So those same heat maps that you just saw, all of our frontline officers have access to those maps. They look at them during their shift briefings, and they are having high visibility in those areas. Sometimes you don't see them, but certainly they are there, and they're given that material, and they're asked to go out there, and when you're not on a call or you're tied up on something else, we literally want you driving up and down the streets, looking for what we're telling you to look for, but also that people can see that they're out there and doing that. You know, my unit specifically is doing surveillance, so hopefully you don't know it's us or we're not doing a very good job, but we're in a plain car with plain clothes on, and we're surveying individuals that we know are involved in this, trying to gather evidence so that we can make arrests and lay charges, but also we're in locations that we know might be heavily targeted. My unit specifically is doing comprehensive follow-up, so any police officer that comes to your door and takes a report, that comes up to my office. I have an investigative team that reviews that and literally looks at every investigative option to further along that offense. We will almost always have our forensics unit come out and process the scene. So they're looking for anything that might be left behind, dusting for fingerprints, stuff like that. We have an assigned analyst to my unit. So a crime analyst that he's liaising with all other jurisdictions. They're sharing video, anything to progress an investigation. Additionally, we routinely share intelligence with other police services. We are at a time, and specifically in Oakville, we don't investigate anyone that lives in Oakville. And so in order for us to have any success, we really have to heavily work with our policing partners. There's no hero in terms of who gets the arrest. We're all seeing the same thing. We're all seeing a rise in crime, and we are helping each other out on each other's investigations. To let all of you know what's going on, we will almost always put out a media release. You saw a few slides ago a media release from 2018. I have other media releases in this presentation, but we want you to know that, hey, we've made an arrest. Often I will put in those media releases some of our best crime prevention tips. They're not guaranteed to work, but they are guaranteed to help. And so I will use that as an opportunity to remind everyone here and everyone else in Oakville of what could help. And finally, we have a fairly wide-ranging prevention strategy. Our best tool that we have is our website. It's very comprehensive. It breaks down all of those crimes that you saw in one of the first slides, and very thoroughly breaks down our property crime, our break-and-enters, and our auto theft. So I would highly encourage everyone to visit it. So, a few recent arrests, and this will also allow me to get into a couple of the different break-and-enter style series that we see. We do have a bit of an alarming series in relation to early morning front door entries for vehicle keys. So this really ties into the spike in auto theft, and this is certainly one of the ways in which individuals are stealing higher-end vehicles. We don't see a lot of these, but we do see some. And typically we're seeing them for vehicles that are more difficult to reprogram in the style that we're normally seeing vehicles. So we do encourage people to not have their keys right at that table on your front door, or even necessarily out in the kitchen table. These are the areas that they're going to. They're not spending very long in the house because it's a little bit more brazen. Typically, I would say to you that break-and-enters will not occur if they know someone is home, except for these individuals. They know that typically people are home at 5 and 6 in the morning. They're getting in and getting out quick. We have found that they are checking for unlocked doors, or the door that leads from the outside into your garage, which is sometimes not locked, and then that door into the house. So it does sound simple, but locking your doors can be a deterrent here. In July and in Ward 6, we saw a big spike in these. We ended up arresting a 15-year-old girl and later arrested an 18-year-old male in relation to 7 of these, so quite serious. This one, kind of sparked us all being here tonight. About 2 weeks ago, Toronto Police made an arrest in relation to a break-and-enter in progress, early evening, rear patio door, and sure enough, the individual was wearing the same clothing as the 14 that we had here. So we ended up making laying an arrest and charges. Once Toronto Police was done, we charged for 5. We're still working through the other ones. But, since that point in time, which was, I believe, January 16th, there's been 2 additional break-and-enters in your ward. They both happened on January 30th, and we're investigating those. So we went from 14 between the 5th and the 14th. We had an arrest on the 16th in Toronto. We laid our charges, and we've had 2 since. So it's quite clear to us who was involved in what was happening. And so now what we will see is them go down. But sure enough, they will come back up again. Another series that I wanted to bring to your attention, we worked on this, this crew for almost an entire year in 2023. They were doing front door kicks. We investigated these individuals across the province, and it was quite a complex, sophisticated investigation. With these investigations, they are still before the courts, so there's not a tremendous amount I can tell you, and I always think the police always say that line, but unfortunately, that is the case. I want to be as transparent and tell you as much as I can, but these matters are still before the courts. But I can tell you that this was another complex, multi-jurisdictional investigation that I'm very proud that my team here in Halton took the lead on, and certainly solved residential break-and-enters throughout the province. So this is yet another example of our cooperation and teamwork in order to get the job done. So, what are some safety tips? And again, I will say that every single one of these safety tips, and much better than I can explain, is on our website. Both these slides are pulled from the website. But, for residential break-and-enters, make your home appear occupied. Certainly, even in the winter months with people who are traveling and they're not home for weeks or months at a time, that can sometimes stick out and be obvious. So, if you can have someone slide by, turn on a light, turn off a light, make your home feel like it's occupied and appear. So, again, simple. Lock your windows and doors. It's going to help. We do see times where they're locked and people move on to another property. There are upgrades you can do in your windows and your doors and security systems. I'm not going to go too much into that. You can certainly tailor that to your residence and what you feel comfortable with. There's tons of different options out there, but it's hard to see here because the slide's a little small, but each one of these is like window safety, front door safety, patio door safety. It's a drop down. It'll give you recommendations. It'll send you the videos, help you find whatever you need. Secure valuables other than in the primary or master bedroom. Oftentimes people are in and out quickly. That's where they're going. So if you can put them somewhere else in the house that may be more difficult to get to, you stand a better chance at keeping them if you are a victim. Know your neighbors and let them know when you're not there. Know what sticks out in your community. If you're work night shift and you come home late, or a lot of our residential break-and-enters are actually during the daytime, so if you're coming home at 2 in the afternoon or you're leaving for something and you see a car that's on the street and it's on it, you don't really know who that car belongs to, that might be something that's important to at least jot down or perhaps even call the police. But certainly know what sticks out, know what's suspicious in your neighborhood. I have the final project safeguard. So again, this is just another preventative tip. Ryan Smith and his team, I think, have done about 40 of these in Ward 3 in relation to the break-and-enters. So we have officers actually going door to door and offering safety inspections. So they'll go through your home, see if they can find any vulnerabilities. It's about an hour long, and leave you with a list of things that might maybe help secure your home. I don't know if you can maybe play this video. I just want to give you an example of some interior cameras that really helped us with this case. Maybe get the video playing, but exterior cameras are very helpful to us. Provides us with date and time. Sometimes description, sometimes vehicle description, but typically it's fairly grainy and it can be very difficult to actually make a positive ID. Interior cameras, very helpful. Typically we'll get words spoken, conversations, and so forth. Are you able just to pop that back up? No? Oh. So this will just give you a bit of an idea of something that's very helpful to us. Is it frozen? Sorry, it's still frozen on the screen, so I'll just continue on there. Thank you. So, I mean, there isn't a tremendous amount to this, but I just wanted to show you the value of interior camera footage in terms of as an investigative resource for us. So I can tell you this is near the end of these individuals being here. You can kind of see the one guy may see that there's a camera. They're just helping themselves. I guess they were worked up a hunger going through the drawers upstairs, so, and out the back patio door. So this is important. This is them canvassing the house prior to going in. You can see they'll always take steps to try to satisfy themselves that there's someone home prior to making entry. So this is, I would say, better than average video than we would typically get. And so even with that video, it's still fairly difficult to make, say, a positive identification. So you can imagine some of the issues that we might face if it's dark out, or if the camera is just capturing the street there.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us for this important project update on our services, firearms, and weapons amnesty program. Before sharing some of the tremendous results of this initiative with you, I want to acknowledge the instrumental role you, our valued media partners, have played in this amnesty's success so far. Public awareness is the precursor to action. Without it and you, we could not have achieved what we have thus far.
So you able to give me a hand there? Thank you.
Our services offer appreciation to the members of the public for their partnership and shared commitment to the safety and well-being of our
Thank you very much. A lot of work to get that video going, so thank you very much back there. So yeah, interior footage, excellent, excellent help.
while we give them a moment to try to work through some technology. I'm assured that the guns work and the tasers work, but maybe not the technology. Want to come up? Or you got the mic?
So while they're working on that, I would just say that, you know, when Ron speaks about what we're doing, please understand that we're not doing this in a silo. So on the other half of our police service, we have what's called our Regional Investigative Services Unit, and that's headed up by Deputy Chief Jeff Hill and Superintendent Kevin Mahar, who are phenomenal at sharing resources with us and cooperating with us and collaborating. When we're seizing cell phones or evidence, you know, it's their ident bureau and their members that are lending us their expertise to see these cases through. So, you know, when I say it's a holistic and team collaborative to solving these cases and being strategic about the way we do that, you know, that side of the house also deserves a great deal of credit, and the leadership on that side as well, helping us out with these cases. So it's a pretty big machine working with you to try and solve these cases and then get them to successful prosecutions. Sorry, Ronnie.
Okay, so technology still being worked on. I was asked to share with you because we have a local resident who happens to be the Honourable Minister Anand, and she couldn't be here tonight but wanted to be here tonight. And she has actually staff here tonight that are listening and to your concerns and to the questions. But she is also, the Minister is participating in the Auto Summit that you would have heard about in the paper. And the federal government has announced $121 million last week and $84 million this week to combat guns and gangs and reinforce border guards against organized crime. So we thought that was information that was important for you to hear. There's always challenges with the courthouse and prosecutions and frustrations that come from that, but there's also some good news that some people have listened, and there are some funds now coming to an important resolution on some very serious crimes. And I'm looking up, and Detective Sergeant Wright, are we good?
I'm not going to get a job in our IT department for sure. But yeah, I think we're back, ready to go. Sorry about that. No more videos, no more videos. So, you know, that's a breakdown of the residential break-and enters. Certainly, we see it in Ward 3 quite frequently. We do every year. You know, the October to March, we see these rear patio door bandits make their way in. They are taking advantage of the less daylight and still hitting at a time where people are typically maybe out for dinner or not home yet. So something to be aware of because it is cyclical, and we will certainly see it next year and moving forward. You know, we have a great case from 2018, and fast forward, here we are again. So I'm going to move on to auto theft, and certainly I'll make some time at the end that we can ask questions on the break-and enters or the auto theft and anything else that you might have a question on. So auto thefts have definitely been the biggest increase that we've seen over the past few years. You can certainly see 2019, 190, last year 804 in Oakville. So this is a giant problem. You know, I have a slide in here about a national summit that I think is actually occurring tomorrow because this is a national problem. We saw a giant spike once these thieves were able to exploit the vulnerabilities in our vehicles, and there's a variety of ways they do it, but they can steal a vehicle in several minutes. And I'll show you a breakdown of which vehicles are being taken in Oakville, but you'll see it's pretty wide-ranging. We predominantly see these vehicles being shipped out of the Port of Montreal, overseas. There is an overseas market for these vehicles, but we also see the vehicles being re-VINed and circulated back here locally. So a re-VINed vehicle is basically, they take the serial number off, which is the VIN of the vehicle, and they replace it with another serial number. And we're seeing these vehicles be used in sometimes legitimately sold to people that don't realize it, but most commonly recirculated into other criminality. So I'm going to briefly go over a couple ways in which this happens, and I'm only really doing it because each way offers a slightly different preventative measure, which is important. And somewhere circulating around here, we brought in a couple things that might help you. An onboard diagnostic blocker, an aftermarket tracker, and the good old club. So I'll start with a relay, which is on the left here. Now, we almost never see relays. They happen probably 1% of our vehicle thefts. The reason that I'm telling all of you guys this is because a relay protects, that Faraday bag or the bag that you put your car keys in, that helps protect against a relay. It doesn't help against the other methods. So if you have a bag and you put your keys in it, you got about a 1% chance of keeping your car safe because we're just not seeing that here. Now, a relay happens within seconds. So typically you have an individual near the house, and what they're doing is they're relaying the actual fob from your vehicle from inside the house through technology to another individual that's near the vehicle, and they can literally start up the vehicle and leave. What we see here in Oakville and in Halton is a reprogramming theft. So it takes a little bit longer to complete. It doesn't use your actual key whatsoever. Has nothing to do with that. They will force entry into the vehicle. Sometimes they'll smash a window, punch the lock out, and then they use the vehicle's computer. So that's the onboard diagnostic part of the vehicle. They'll stick a computer into that, and they'll actually reprogram a key fob that they have in their possession. So in about 15 to 20 minutes, the key fob that they brought will now be the key fob that that vehicle recognizes. So it takes a little bit longer, but that type of technology is readily available, and we see that used all the time. Yeah, the OBD lock is up here. I think Chernell took the club. But I'll just pass this along, and you can have a look. This basically just goes right in the carport, and it will block that device that they need to stick in to reprogram. I think probably at the back, but I mean, everyone's kind of seen the club. The club is a steering wheel bar. We have seen them saw through that before, but again, it is a deterrent. Most people will be familiar with an air tag as well. So we very much recommend an aftermarket tracker well hidden in the vehicle. They typically know where the factory manufactured GPS is, and that's usually a couple streets down by the time we get there from where they stole the vehicle, because they'll rip it out. So something after the market is very helpful. We recover about 30% of the stolen vehicles, and I think it's about 80% when there's an aftermarket tracker, so significantly helps. The last method is newer. We just started seeing it about a year and a half ago, which is they're accessing a different part of the vehicle, the controller area network, hooking a piece of technology up there, able to start the car and drive away. So I call it technology-based because to figure out different pieces of technology in order to steal the car, and not one preventative piece is going to help. So again, when we look at since 2017 on, certainly see a huge spike in auto thefts. Like I said, we were about 190 in 2019 and over 800 last year. And I will say that this is despite like a significant investment from the police service in these. We arrest people all the time, seize hundreds of stolen vehicles, and it certainly doesn't put a dent in it. So for your ward last year, 143. This is kind of the areas that they're predominantly targeting. Month didn't really matter. What we typically see with these are they're overnight. So this is between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. That these are happening. So certainly, if you're coming home late and you see, again, something that's suspicious on your street, don't be afraid to contact the police. And again, this is just for contrast, what we're seeing on all of Oakville. So it's certainly throughout. It's throughout. This map would look very similar to if we put up Peel or York or anywhere else. You know, be very interesting what comes from this national summit, but certainly, you know, we've been putting a fair bit of strategy to try to curb this as best we can locally, but also working with our partners nearby. So I'll go through this. This is just a breakdown for Oakville. You know, our Land Rover, it's fairly equal. Our Toyota products, 17%. The Land Rover's at about 16%. The Lexus RX series SUVs, 18%. And then we have everything from the Yukons, the Tahoes, Jeeps, Escalades, Dodge Rams, F-150s. Certainly all of these vehicles are susceptible to being reprogrammed within 15 to 20 minutes and stolen from your driveway. So I have another video, but I'm not going to play it. I will just say that it was really just taking you to our website. We have spent a fair bit of time rebuilding the website specifically with auto theft. Each of these areas is a drop down in terms of what we're doing about it, prevention, how it happens, you know, additional information. I would encourage you to visit it. HaltonPolice.ca, staying safe, and you'll find auto theft. It's the first one. But again, you know, what will help? You know, it can help to have your vehicle in the garage if you're able to do it. We know that these individuals are scouting streets for the vehicles that they're looking to steal. If it's not there or visible, it can help. The OBD port lock that's being passed around, $30 off Amazon. Lock it into your port, it will help. Steering wheel lock, it will help, and the aftermarket tracker. So last year, you know, we really wanted to reach out to individuals living in Oakville that had their vehicle stolen. You know, we have the initial police response where we're coming, we're asking you for video, we're taking your information down, but some of the feedback we were hearing was, well, what happened next? I didn't ever hear back. I can tell you what's happening next on my end is my investigators are doing all the things that we saw before. They're liaising with other services, they're looking at video, they're writing different types of warrants to get information. But we made it a point to call each member that had their vehicle stolen. We're probably still a little bit behind, but, and just say, hey, I'm the investigator that's actually looking in your case. This is what we've learned, this is what we have, we think it's connected to something else, just to have an extra layer of customer service. But we really wanted to get out this aftermarket GPS. So we did partner with some of the dealerships who would install it for you, put it somewhere well hidden. We did put out a media release back in May about that. But the real message is get an aftermarket tracker. Don't put it in your center console. Put it somewhere better. Put it in the trunk. Put it somewhere that's well hidden. With the AirTags, if your phone is near it, it does work off of Bluetooth. It will send an alert. But if they can't find it, they might abandon your vehicle. And at least we can recover it, get whatever else is in your vehicle back to you. You know, I bring up, you know, again, what are we doing? You know, the goal to get stolen vehicles is wide-ranging, and we've certainly participated in a vast amount of different projects. This was with the OPP, where 200 vehicles were recovered and multiple people were arrested. This was with Peel Police and York Police. 200 vehicles recovered, multiple people arrested. This was with York, specifically with the carjackings. We had our own carjacking, obviously investigative team that was making arrests and seizing a handgun in this case, but also vehicles. This was Project Eleanor, which was a project run right out of our office here in Oakville, where we recovered 32 vehicles and arrested multiple people. We have a regional auto theft team that started last year, where we combined resources to have a team regionally in addition to our district-led team, in addition to seconding investigators to all of these projects. Hundreds of arrests, thousands of vehicles recovered, and we just see the spike continue to go up. So all to say that there's other partners that have a role to play in keeping our vehicles safe. We will see what comes out of this summit, but certainly, you know, We have to work with the ease in which these vehicles are stolen, the ease sometimes in which they're actually shipped out of Canada, in order to make a difference. So last slide, always like to throw in, when should we call the police? So we do have a non-emergency number. You can't really see it, 905-825-4777. So this would be something if you learn about something after the fact. I've come back from vacation and my house is broken into, or I've woken up in the morning or something like that and my car's gone, something like that, something that's not in progress. But any crime in progress, that's a call to 911. So if you think someone is actively stealing a vehicle or actively stealing from a vehicle or actively trying to break into a house, impaired driving, all sorts of stuff, that's a call to 911. So don't be afraid to make that call. We will respond, of course, and it will be a priority response. This is just a front page of our website. It's, again, tough to see because of the screen, but staying safe is right up here. Click on it, drop down to about 30 different criminal offenses, safety tips, preventative tips, videos, everything that you would want. It's a great resource. That is the end of the presentation. So happy to take questions on these topics, but I'll also open it up to the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Chair Knoll, you had a question you wanted to answer before we go to the list that we've received?
Thanks, Ron, for that presentation. Just a couple cleanup things I wanted to mention. One of the items that Janet and Dave brought forward to us was your list of questions that were collected from the community. And one of them I want to address because it's kind of a board issue at this point, and that is there's many people were asking about the reintroduction of Neighborhood Watch into the community. So this is something that my staff and the board office are working on right now in terms of doing the research to find out what's involved in getting that going again. And this will be before the board on February 29th this month. I know that we've already raised it with the chief, and we're just trying to find out where the program stands in other jurisdictions. I had the distinction of being the second last president of Neighborhood Watch in Oakville before it folded, and we think it folded, well, one reason was we didn't have enough volunteers, and two, because I think generally people were pretty satisfied with their public safety in the community. So when these programs seem to become very popular whenever there's upticks in crime, but we've heard your request and we're working on it. I want to apologize that somebody stole our club today. We found it? Okay, good. That's right. Somebody may put it on their car, but we should put an air tag on that club so we can track it. I also want to let you know that in terms of the police, in terms of the auto theft, Ron was talking about the summit. I'll be attending the summit with the chief tomorrow, but your board has actually been already proactively doing a lot of advocacy on this. We've held meetings with our local members of parliament, one of them so far and another one hopefully soon, to express our point of view on the thing. We've made some suggestions. One of them is to tighten the borders with CBSA, investigate the containers before they leave the Port of Montreal to find the plethora of cars that are being shipped offshore that Ron was mentioning earlier, but also to put pressure on the auto manufacturers because prevention is cheaper than enforcement. I own a Tesla, and I'm not bragging because I'm sure some other people here own Teslas too, but it's one of the most unstealable cars, and one of the reasons is it has technology that thwarts a two-factor authentication. I have to put a PIN code in before I can actually drive off. And that pretty much makes Teslas largely, yes, you can steal them. You can pick them up on a tow truck and take them away, but it really slows down the process. So we're putting a lot of pressure on the powers that be, the insurance industry, the auto manufacturers, as well as the federal government, both through the Halton Police Board and in my other role as a member of the board of directors of the Canadian Association of Police Governance. Last thing I want to mention, and I'm sorry, I hope I'm not taking away the other Jeff's thunder on this. We have a tendency to bring people on the board service with the name Jeff. So Jeff Hill, anyway. I wanted to mention to you that one of the most disappointing things you're going to hear tonight is this. These guys do a fantastic job in getting the bad guy. The real problem that we face today is the fact that they can get the bad guy or girl. They can write terrific reports, gather all the evidence in the world, create the most narrative and successful Crown briefs to go before the courts, and yet the courts are sending them home the day after they're arrested. The judges are not instituting penalties that fit the crime, if they're even heard in court, because we have a court in Milton that is not safe, and we have judges who will sometimes refuse to even serve because of mold and asbestos and this lack of safety. We have a number of issues that, while the enforcement folks can do a great job, the ball gets dropped at the justice level, and that is out of our control. This is something that these folks are concerned about every single day, and I can get to talk about this because it's slightly political. One of my imperatives to all of you, and yes, I'm looking forward to your questions, but one of my imperatives to all of you is speak to your provincial and federal representatives and let them know that you want them to do something about the justice system. Bail reform, which I know there's some work being done on that, good work being done on that right now, but it needs to go faster, it needs to be stronger, and appointment of judges, and appointment of JPs, and strengthening of, I can't remember the term, but it's sentencing guidelines. These are all things that the justice system needs to address, and that needs to be addressed at the federal and provincial level. Because as fast as they're caught, they're back on the street and they're doing this again. And this is particularly a bad situation in the auto theft business. It's literally the time in jail overnight, and the bonds are simply a cost of doing business, and that has to stop because they're doing their job, but the other side of this is not happening. So thank you, Janet, for letting me add those few extra points. Look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Chair Noel. There's one other thing you could advocate for, and that is the courthouse that Hopeville and Halton have been pleading to have built. That would be a real change maker in terms of just getting court time and moving things along.
We still have the land sitting there waiting.
Oh, and we have land, so it's not going to be that difficult. We're on to Q&A, and the microphone at the back is going to be ready for questions from you. But as we had requested in the ward newsletter, there were questions sent in. So we're going to try and start with a few of those, and then any brave soul who wants to go to the microphone, of course, will invite you to the center. So one of the questions is about somebody does enter the house and I am home. What advice do you have for people around how they respond when it's actually they misunderstood and there is somebody there?
Yes, so certainly we would advocate that people call 911 right away. Often get this question, and it's phrased in that, what will happen to me if I attack them or try to protect myself, or we're not advocating for physical confrontation in most of the crimes that we've spoken about tonight, almost all of them. If they encounter someone, they're leaving. They're also not looking for a physical confrontation, and we don't want someone getting hurt. Certainly sympathize the sanctity of a home and someone violating that and the seriousness of that, but we don't want the individuals in there for your keys or your jewelry for that to end up with someone being seriously hurt or killed. So our advice, call 911.
Okay, thank you.
And Jen, I'll just add on to that. So I would say, folks, we realize how scary it is and how traumatic it can be. And I think that, certainly our pillar of incident response, where we have some excellent uniform officers out there that respond to calls quickly, particularly when they're of this priority nature. But in conjunction with you bringing these concerns forward and your counselors bringing them to us, we certainly did strategically put in a plan in place where we deployed more targeted patrols to the area. We certainly put plainclothes as well as uniform officers out there. Proactively, as well as our response times to these incidents, but we also then overlaid Ryan Smith's CMB, or Community Mobilization Bureau, in terms of utilizing our auxiliaries and other police officers to go door to door, not just to be a police presence, but to offer their educational pieces and Project Safeguard to people within the community to help make your home safer. all of those officers and the platoons that are led by our NCOs in the district also had to contribute to projects directly related on every single day and every single night that their platoons were working, and reporting back on the metrics to us as a leadership group of what is being accomplished, and for us to actually assess whether what we're doing was working. And that is in conjunction with what our Criminal Investigations Bureau, led by Detective Sergeant Wright, was also doing. So when we say it's, we attack it holistically and certainly use the pillars of our community safety and well-being plan to attack these problems, we certainly do look at it as a project and an ongoing project. So it's to overlay and let you know, the resources that I authorize when we have problems like this, they are not just reactionary or to one occurrence. It's that we take a look at, is it systematic, and are we dealing with more than just a blip? And we strategically deploy our resources to that. And the other piece before you go on, Jen, Chair Noel we appreciate the support and we appreciate the words that you just spoke about. Certainly our other partners in the justice system. I do meet with the Crown Attorneys, as do, Deputy Wilkie, Deputy Hill, and the Chief, in terms of advocating, in terms of bail compliance and sentencing. But you should know this: none of our people, none of your officers are deterred by the fact that that's a problem area right now in the justice system. We are there to do our jobs and perform as highly as we possibly can to offer you the best customer service. Like every single occurrence that we go to that ends with, a break and enter or stolen auto, we have endeavored, and it's part of our priority, to make sure that we circle back with every single victim. So whoever the detective is that's in charge of that particular case, we want to be in touch with those victims personally. But beyond that, the motivation level of the officers that I have working in my district is phenomenal. They are not deterred, they're not complaining. They certainly don't like it when we're arresting people and they're back out the next day, but it is not affecting their motivation to do the job, which is to protect you. And you should know that. It's an important point.
Thank you, Superintendent. So there's been several questions came in about private security services. Should they hire one? Do they get a priority response when they arrive at the house and there's been a break-in? Can you just talk to us a little bit about private security services and people's intent to do that? Any pros and cons?
Yeah, well, it's a loaded question. I'll certainly pass the mic along, but I will say that, no pun intended, but I will say that, we're not here to tell people what to invest in. But if you wanted my opinion, I would say this, that, certainly all of you and your support is felt through certainly the board as well as the constituents and regional council in terms of the increase in our budget to help fight crime and address our priority populations. And I would say that that is where the best investment is. So I will not deride private security companies, but I will say, if you have a private security company patrolling your neighborhood and they come upon a crime, we're still going to have to be called to that. Like, we are coming to address that and investigate it properly. So, where I think the investment needs to be is in those upstream activities that can help us, as well as education, as well as our response to the crimes. And I think we're going down that road now. We've had the problem, but we certainly are deriving support through funding, through our board and regional council and yourselves. And that is my opinion of where the investment needs to be, quite frankly. So, as well as the justice system. Like, our friends in the justice system on the Crown Attorney's side, I think they're facing many of the same problems in terms of funding that we may. And I think they deserve support, and because that is the only way forward in terms of fighting this collectively as a team. So.
there's a huddle happening.
Yeah, sorry, I think the other part of the question was, does private security get a
higher priority.
higher priority? No, we don't, we respond to our priority calls from you, or even if it was private security. We do have, we have codes, certainly probably about 98 of them, that we use when we're dispatching officers. And they're dispatched by a very professional crew of communications folks that we have working who prioritize those calls as they come in and get them out. And so depending on what it is, you could have a private security firm that calls something in, but it may not actually be a priority, and they may call one in that is a priority, much like yourselves. And so it really is dependent on the facts, the circumstances, and the decision-making we make around how we get the call from communications in terms of what type of priority we place on it. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. Another couple questions I'll tie together. One was that someone had noticed a significant increase in vehicles with illegal window tints, greater than 30% maximum, and sometimes even on the front windshield or obscured license plates. Is there anything that can be done to address this? Inspector?
I thought Ryan was going to answer this, being the... Yes, certainly illegal window tint is something that happens. Your front windshield can't have any tint on it, and your side windshields can't have more than 30%. So we have instruments in order to measure that, and it's a ticket under the Provincial Offences Act. It's not a crime. It's a statute offense. And when our officers are out on patrol and they find those, they lay the appropriate charge. I think it's $185 and $110 plus the victim service charge.
Thank you for that. Oh, an additional comment.
Yeah, I think we have a district response unit as well that handles a lot of problem calls, nuisance calls, but also certain our traffic safety concerns under that pillar. And so they are out there. This may be something that alerts our officers to doing a traffic stop because they need to investigate that Highway Traffic Act offense, which may lead to other things. So is it suspicious in nature? Certainly. Is it against the law, the Highway Traffic Act and provincial offense? Yes. So they'll stop it. That's another reason and another thing that they're looking for out there, because it does pertain to traffic safety, but it may roll over into criminal offenses as well. So.
All right, I'm learning lots. I hope you are. Last one before I go to the mics is there's a question about canvassers knocking on doors, and there is a fair amount of concern about, you see the video, what we saw of the video, and they're checking possibly to see if you're home or not, and I think we've scared a few UNICEF canvassers in the neighborhood. The guy was legit, okay? He was really just trying to do a good job. Any comments on canvassers? And because it is creating a sense of, I don't want to answer the door, and yet then people might think you're not home. So any comments or advice?
Yeah, so we've encountered through our proactive patrols with our auxiliary team, who's probably come out and knocked on some of your doors. We've encountered some of those canvassers that work for legitimate companies. With that being said, that might not always be the case. I can't speak to that definitively, but my suggestion is if somebody were to come to your door, you can speak to them through your door, and if you're not comfortable opening your door, just tell them no thank you and have them move on. And I think if they create any type of issue or create some additional discomfort, you can absolutely call us and we would respond and just ensure that in fact they do represent the organization that they say they do, or at least get that information from them. So with that said, I mean, absolutely, as opposed to them maybe not recognizing that you're home or looking to see if you're home, you can just tell them, I'm not interested tonight, thank you, have a good night. And I would suggest if they work for a legitimate organization, they would most likely move on, and if not, you can absolutely give us a call.
So Councillor Dave, should I tell them the other trick that you have about having your cell phone in your hand and potentially going to hit the 911 if you need to? Another trick I learned from Dave, which is the next day I actually had my phone when I went to the door. All right, so I've tried to cover a lot of what's come in, but you've been very patient at the microphone. So, sir, you have a question for the panel, and we want to hear what your question is and help you with an answer.
All right, wonderful, thank you. And thanks to all the leaders for attending tonight. It really does mean a lot. So my question is maybe a bit of a loaded one, and I might have a follow-up for the representatives of Anand on this one. But for the 51-year-old that was caught recently, where is he today? And for the 8 that were caught in the kick-in entries, my understanding is 4 of them were released on bail after committing 68 different offenses. So can you fill us in on where all of these people are today?
Yeah, I'm going to let Ron answer it because he's in the best position in terms of having those cases with his people assigned to it. So, and then I can add on after.
So thank you. You know, I can say that all of the individuals in the cases that we've discussed tonight have been released on bail. You know, I will tell you that, you know, we have legislation, it's a few years old now, that basically is directed towards releasing individuals on bail as being the priority. It's actually, this legislation talks about keeping people in custody as rare, and you know, it should be exceptional circumstances if someone's kept in custody. I will say that for us, as we prepare documentation to hold people in custody, and the documentation to say that we don't want them to have bail, it's fairly comprehensive. You know, we are putting in there stuff like their record, we are putting in there the impact on the community, we are putting in there our objective reasons of why we believe they may reoffend, and we are speaking to the requirements of bail, I feel like, fairly well. It is frustrating for us. You know, I talked about one of the cases that was almost 12 months in duration. So what takes this long to build enough evidence that we could reasonably arrest, charge, and present a prosecutable case, it's frustrating days later to know that they're back out. However, you know, that is something that is beyond our control. We do, you know, monitor these individuals to the best that we can to ensure that they are complying with any conditions of their bail that they may have. But, you know, this is a reality that we certainly live in, and it's an important piece for everyone to understand because it's certainly something that through advocating for could be changed. So everyone that you've learned about today in the presentation, including the 51-year-old and the 4 individuals that you had brought up, is out on bail.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's a very critical point to solving the issue, as was raised on stage just 5 minutes prior. So my question to the representatives of our Member of Parliament, and you don't have to answer this now, but I would encourage everybody in this room to ask them separately, is why hasn't Bill C-75 been repealed already if it's directly linked to all of these crimes? I think we're all going to talk to you afterwards.
All right, thank you for your question. Good evening, ma'am. You have the
Hi.
mic.
My name is Gabriela. I wanted to first say thank you for the Project Safeguard. They actually came into my home. They gave me a lot of pointers. I'm very happy with it. What I'm not happy is that I've been living less than 1 year in Oakville, and my house got broken into a few weeks back. And other than having like M3 windows replaced and like maybe increasing more video surveillance, and we already have an alarm system, we have video surveillance already, just increasing it to more degree, I guess. That's all that the police could tell us to do, maybe changing our back door. What can I do to feel safe at my own home? Like, I'm coming from a country that I fled, which is Mexico, because of insecurity. And I feel the same way coming here in Oakville, which is kind of sad. And I have a baby, and I cannot believe that I feel in so much fear at my own property. How can I get over this, especially if the criminals are out back again? Are they gonna come back to my property? Like, we were lucky enough that we were not at home because it was at 7:30 p.m. when this happened, but what if we were to be home? I don't have to have all my lights on to make sure to light up, like, oh, I'm home. Like, sometimes I'm at my baby's room where they're with the lights off because she's having a nap. So how can I, like, do I need to have everything on? At this point, I feel kind of
Well,
sad. And I
certainly.
feel like I pay a lot of property taxes to feel safe in my own property.
So thank you for sharing your experience. Officers?
Yeah, so I can start off. Certainly, we sympathize with all of our victims of crime. We bring up some of the data and the statistics for context, but your point is very profound in that sometimes that doesn't make a difference when you have been a victim of a crime. So, I can tell you some of the preventative tips in terms of, locking doors and those things will help. Can we definitively say if you do this one thing, no one will come to your house to break in or attempt to steal your vehicle? Of course we can't. All we can say is that collectively it's important to have a look at the preventative tips. I will say that in the mass majority, overwhelming of our residential break-in enters, and even the different ways in which autos are stolen, these individuals are not looking for encounters. I don't know if that necessarily relieves any of your stress, but they are not. When they do encounter somebody in the home, they are fleeing, they are leaving. That doesn't necessarily alleviate all of your stress, but I do hope that it helps in terms of your safety as a whole. The tips do help. Making your house appear occupied, a light on. I can't tell you how many to turn on, but if they believe that someone is home, they almost never will make entry into the home. And so all we can do is tell you what does help, and certainly, we encourage you to look into those steps and how, the auxiliaries and the Project Safeguard, those recommendations may very well help you. We don't necessarily see in the crime trends that these criminals are targeting the exact same house each and every time. In fact, it's usually different members that are kind of falling in within an organized crew that are going out. And so they're not necessarily looking at a specific house. They may be looking at a house that they believe is vulnerable because of lighting, or they believe that someone's not home, or they've taken some steps in which you saw in the video where they're actually doing a door knock and looking in a window and those things. So I wish I had one answer that would alleviate all your stress, but unfortunately it's really a combination of all of those things.
Thank you for your question and sharing. And the other I'd just like to add to that is I think knowing your neighbors and having the comfort of your neighbors can make a difference, and I hope that you experience that.
I do know my neighbors. Like a few days ago, I actually reported the same car taking pictures of our property and neighbor's property. I was literally at my neighbor's house. I went to say hello with my baby and my husband, and it's the same car being reported outside my property. One time it came actually inside of my property, which I have like a U lane. It actually went inside, took pictures of my property, my neighbors. This time it was taking pictures of all the properties around our neighbors. I ran to try to catch a car plate. Impossible, because it's so wiggly because of my phone. But is there a way we can increase more lighting in the streets, or at least cameras? Something that can help us other than us trying to run and trying to catch a car plate, because it's kind of hard to do that.
So I can tell you that the street lights themselves, if you call in to Service Oakville, there are some ways to raise the lighting, but across all of the street, I'll write down and ask the question of whether or not that's possible, but I would say that I would start with the lights on near your property, and Service Oakville can send someone out to look at whether or not, I think it's called the lumens, are strong enough.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
So thank you. Next question?
Yeah. And I would just say, I mean, I certainly empathize with the feeling that you've certainly spoken about, and I think that when we talk about holistically attacking the problem, it is that, you know, yes, we send our auxiliaries around and we have the door-to-doors with you, but at the same time, I think folded into that is our increased patrols, our making this an actual project and deploying other resources to it so that we can try and stem the tide and help in that way and make you safer. And we hope that all of those things together will be the key to helping strategically attack the problem and help you. Because it's, yeah, we really empathize with what you're saying. And as I said, you know, many of us here have family in this region, and I would, you know, they would feel the same way. I would feel the same way if, you know, my mother or sister's house was broken into. So, yeah, thank you for the comment and bringing it forward. So, and I would just say, if you've called in suspicious vehicles, please know that every single one of those calls, if they come through to us, they are investigated very thoroughly. So we don't just forget about them because we only got a partial plate, or, you know, officers are out there canvassing the neighborhood, looking for other video, not just within the street, but perhaps on arteries where the car may have escaped to or driven by. And I won't give up any investigative know-how or some of the techniques that we use, but they are investigated thoroughly, and I want you to know that. So.
Thank you, Superintendent. Ma'am.
Thank you. This is more a comment than a question. I want to thank very much the police who've been very active on our street in the last month. Thank you. Secondly, it's not necessary for us to sit in our houses and be afraid and think we can't do anything to help these people who are working so hard to catch the people who do the evil. We all have telephones, we all pay taxes, and we can all write. So we need to contact our politicians and our representatives, and we need to tell them to do something about these things that are bothering us. And if we don't stand up and help the police who are helping us, we are going to sit in our houses and be scared forever. So I think we should do something.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Vikram. I live in the neighborhood. Thanks, Dave and Janet, for organizing this. Appreciate your diligence always in addressing our concerns. I had two questions, and this is addressed to anyone who can answer. You shared a statistic where the crime rates were going in double digits over the last years, 15%, 45% on top of that. But the budget allocation, from what I could guess from the numbers of 29 new police officers will be inducted versus 700 who exist, that's barely a single-digit percentage increase. What was the rationale, if you could explain, of a 5% or less increase in police presence or budget to combat a 50% rise in apparent crime? That's one question. Would you like to answer that first, and then I can go to the next one?
Yeah, I can touch that.
Chair Knoll will take it, though I will tell you that Regional Council was very supportive of the budget that was presented.
Yeah, that's true. Janet supported the budget increase, which was way above the budget guidelines. So thank you, Janet, for supporting our budget and for supporting the police. It's important to understand that there's not necessarily a direct correlation between increasing the number of officers in the street and reducing crime, because they're not on every corner. We couldn't increase the number of police officers to literally be everywhere at all times. It's just not possible. Our goal with the increase this year, which was already a substantial increase over previous years, was the first step in trying to get us to a point where we are catching up with where we were from previous years, where we had serious budget suppression issues. So, I'm not sure it's 29, but it's in the 20s, which is brand new officers. Plus, we have to hire a whole group of new officers to replace retirements, transfers, resignations, the OPP stealing our people. And that, the combination of those two things is really enough for 1 year, because even if we were to increase the budget and say hire 50 officers, it'd be unlikely that we would be able to achieve that in a year, because the recruitment process is very time consuming, it's very expensive. So our goal as a board is to start getting those numbers up so we can catch up with growth, but also to help as a, to help in the crime prevention areas, provide more services that can do the proactive things. But it's important to understand that, again, we could double 700 officers, and we could have 1,400 officers tomorrow. And the 51-year-old that was arrested would likely still do the crime. Maybe he'd be caught a little faster, and then the province's bail system is probably good, or the provincial court judge or the justice of the peace is still going to let him out in the same amount of time. So it's important to understand that we are using the resources to the best of our ability to suppress crime, but it's still not. It's not the primary goal of policing. It's about enforcing issues when they come up. So we're going to keep working on it. We're going to keep raising that bar. We're going to continue to try to keep up with growth and keep the funding going to the police service, while at the same time keeping your taxes at a reasonable level, because that's the other concern as well. So I hope that answered your questions from a politician's point of view. But we're doing the best we can with the resources that we have available to us.
Absolutely. The question actually wasn't intended to be a critique of the number, just to understand the rationale behind the number. Why 29? Why not 50? And you answered that to some degree. I think one is to replenish the depleted ranks of retiring officers, and to some extent supplement the need for more policing. Is that as I understand it, is that correct?
Yeah, and I think if I could just add on to Chair Knoll's comments is, the budget increase wasn't just to put more police officers on the road, right? We have to be strategic about how we go about fighting this particular trend or priority. And some of that money and some of that budgeted piece goes towards increased investigative services. So, we're adding 2 more specialized investigative teams, both for auto theft and crime. And both of those teams are run out of Regional Investigative Services. As I mentioned earlier, Deputy Chief Jeff Hill and Superintendent Mahar kind of run that side of the house. And those teams will support what we are doing in the districts as well. So you budget for those things, but you also have to remember that we have civilian members that we're hiring, analysts, people that can actually look at the numbers, the trends, identify intelligence for us to help us be more efficient in how we go about doing the job. And I think all of those things in totality make up where that investment will hopefully help us stem the tide over the next few years anyway. So it's a holistic way of looking at how the budget tells our story.
Okay, thank you. That explains a lot.
Sorry, I have one more thing I just want to add to that. So Jeff touched on this a second ago, and that is with respect to the fact that that budget increase isn't just for officers. It is for a whole package of goods. And in fact, some of that package of goods will actually put more of the officers back on the street, as opposed to being assigned to areas that are not their specialization. I think about murder, for example, murder investigations. There's a reorganization. But the other thing that you have to keep in mind is that crime has become extraordinarily sophisticated and international in scope, and the technology and the time it takes to investigate some of these crimes, especially when they're multi-jurisdictional, is expensive. And in addition to that, we spend a lot of money keeping officers sitting on benches in courthouses because of the justice system issue I talked about before. So we're not just adjusting for growth, we're not just adjusting for increases in crime, we're also adjusting for the fact that there are other pressures on the service, just like there is in your household. There's other pressures on the service, gas prices for the vehicles and everything else that goes along with it. And the one thing that's really scary is the cost and sophistication of new crimes. They cost an incredible amount of money to investigate and deal with, particularly when they cross borders of jurisdictions, but also international borders. So.
I understand. Thank you for clarifying. I have a follow-up question, which is more informational for me to understand. I've known of friends and people I know who had their home broken into, without going into details, but at no point were they ever involved in the procedure of persecuting the person who attacked the house or stole their property. My understanding of law may be limited, but shouldn't they have been part of the court process? Shouldn't they have been in court and saying, hey, that guy broke into my house or stole my car, I want to press charges? It seems that they were not even part of the picture. And this is a story I seem to have heard a lot. Would you guide me and help me understand where does the victim stand in terms of the prosecution of the person who's attacked the house or invaded their property?
Yeah, sure. I'll start it off, and then I think I'll pass the mic over to Ron. So, we endeavor to do an excellent job with our victim services unit, but also with our investigators who are charged with seeing the investigation through. So I'm sure that your friends or any of you that have had this crime take place have had police officers or support people actually contacting you to keep you abreast of what's happening with the investigation and then the prosecution. But as we've discussed tonight, at some stage, once we pass that threshold of catching the people, putting a good case forward, presenting the witnesses, preparing the witnesses, it moves over into the prosecutor's area. And, I can't speak to how that's being done or how people are being treated within that sector. I would hope, I meet with the Crown attorneys on a fairly regular basis, and we have some excellent Crown attorneys here in Halton. So I would say that many of the things that you say, just so you know, and some of the feelings I've heard tonight, 3 weeks ago I met with the Crown attorneys and they actually heard this from me. Like, I actually put cases in front of them that we're speaking about tonight. And I actually did say to them and actually tried to communicate with them what you're feeling and the fear and the trauma that goes into these types of crimes. So, yeah, I'll let Ron speak to that, but I know we have, every year we do, we look at all our cases, and part of what we do is trying to improve customer service as best as we can. And a part of that customer service is victim services and how we communicate with people that are affected by crime. But we can only take it so far and then hand it off to our justice partners. So I'll let Ron comment.
Yeah, certainly in a case that would go to trial, you 100% would absolutely be required to come and testify and tell your story, what happened. You would be the first hand of that information, and that would be standard procedure in a criminal trial. I can't tell you how many of our arrests and charges go to trial for that process to occur. Certainly, once we make an arrest and lay charges, we almost always will be following up the victim, not just to let them know that this has occurred, but also part of our disclosure or what we have to present in the paperwork is actually a formal statement from you. This is what happened, and of course a lot of that is in the initial report, but almost a separate document. So part of our administrative process would be to contact the victim to ensure that we have that information disclosed and in the paperwork portion of it. But again, it's tough for me to comment on how many of these go to trial. We have spoken about courthouses and court space and what, crimes can go to trial. And unfortunately, we don't make the decision as the police in terms of what goes to trial and what doesn't. I can tell you we very much would welcome the opportunity to take our cases to court and present our findings because they're impactful. Unfortunately, like I said, I don't know how many are going that far.
Okay, thank you. That helps a lot. I'm just curious, should one hire a criminal lawyer and actually actively go after these guys if you're a victim?
Sorry, what was that question?
Should one, as a victim, hire a professional criminal lawyer and actively go to court? Because obviously there's no lawyer representing the victim, as I understand it.
So maybe I'd suggest that that's a question for the justice system.
I think that certainly our system is set up so that the Crown Attorney's Office has carriage of those cases. So, no, you wouldn't be hired. I totally get where you're coming from, but you wouldn't hire a lawyer on your own to do that unless you were going down a civil route. with the case that you were involved with, but certainly the Crown Attorney, through our Ministry Solicitor General's office, they have carriage of that. I think what Ron is trying to say, fairly openly is we catch them, we prepare the cases, whether the case goes forward to trial or not, or is withdrawn, that's not our decision.
I understand. It wasn't meant as a critique, more for my understanding of how the system works.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we need to organize a similar session with the Justice Department.
Well, we shall
Thank you.
see. I'd like them in the courthouse. We have the last two questions at the back.
Hi, I'll try and be quick. Unless you have new information, the Milton Courthouse has been in operation for a while, because I was on jury duty in October, and I encourage anybody that's called for jury duty to do it, because you learn so much. It just goes above and beyond what these people are doing to see it go through. My other comment was, last fall, our neighbor got egged. They egged her house. And about 3 days later, 2 young guys came by and asked if they could wash her windows. And they came to my house and asked if they could wash my windows, and they wanted to count my windows. And I thought, here's a couple of teenagers just looking for some extra cash, right? And I thought, no, I'm fine. I only have like 9 windows, like, forget it. And about 3 days later, another 2 guys came by and they said, can we wash your windows? We want to count your windows. And I said, look, do you have any identification? And he showed me his driver's license. And I said, like, are you working for somebody? He says, yeah, my dad, he's got like so-and-so's window washing. He's got a truck and everything. And I just told him to beat it. But thinking back now, should I have called you about some, like, I don't know, I think, like, he wanted to go around my house and count my windows, and now, with all this information with the break-ins, I'm thinking, okay, we have a patio door, we have, yada, 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 and I don't know, it seems stupid.
A short answer.
Yeah, so that would be, a perfect call for the non-emergency line,
Okay.
where you could call in and report what occurred, and certainly we would look into the mischief portion of the egging and whether there's a connection between these individuals that are offering to wash the windows. But, that number is there for incidences just like that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have room for one more. We're running over time, but
Maybe just before we take that question, I just wanted to go back and just let you know, we do have an organization, the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, that advocates quite heavily in this area, and both with the Ministry of the Attorney General, who has carriage over crowns and prosecutors, but also the Solicitor General's office in terms of bail compliance and some of the other issues we've spoken about tonight. So, Deputy Chief Wilkie from Halton actually sits as the first Vice President for the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, and I know they have been quite active in certainly advocating on many of the issues with both the Ministry of the Attorney General and the Solicitor General's office. So we're trying to hit it from quite a few angles.
sir?
Yes, hello. What is the expected response time for the police to arrive in the case of a home alarm or a break and enter? Because the night that our house was broken into, while the police were there, it sounded like there were other break-ins happening at the same time, where the criminals left our house and went to another house. So I'm just wondering, the last house being broken into that night, they would have been attended to after a very long time. So what would be the expected response time for the police in this case?
It's a response time request.
Do you want to handle that particular piece?
Like, is there one group managing an area that go to the houses one after another, or are there police being dispatched after every single call?
Yeah, so that would be a priority response. So that would be a crime in progress where, the second that we get that call, we would be dispatching officers. It very well might be that officers are pulling off of calls that they're on that they're near completed, or they have the availability to jump off those calls to respond. But those are lights and sirens calls. There may be a delay in terms of when it actually occurred and when the information gets to us, but those are lights and siren response for us.
Okay. So because of the break and enter that happened to us, we're investing more into the security of our home. But looking at some of the other houses in the area, we see that they have metal fencing, automatic gates, and they're really starting to look like fortresses. So my concern is there anything the city can do with regards to infrastructure? I know my wife mentioned lights, putting more lights around the streets. But, I don't want to have to build up our house to make it feel like a fortress and closing ourselves in. It's too nice of a neighborhood for us to just stay inside.
Yeah, so I think it's an excellent question. And, what I would say is, yes, absolutely lighting and the other environmental pieces that are spoken to when we come by to actually speak to you in regards to the design of your houses. But, you also have to remember that your gates, for instance, let's say you're not home, but you have a gate, a security gate on your home, and somebody's breaking in, and we respond as a priority item, and we get there quite quickly. The police still have to get past those gates as well. And it can take time up in terms of our response and our containment of your property. And so, this isn't in any way, shape, or form putting blame anywhere else. It's that these are obstacles that we'll encounter as well and could affect our actual response time. So, if you're home and the gates can be opened right away to have access, then certainly for our responding troops, then that's a good thing. If you're not, and gates are locked, or it is fortresses like you have described, it is going to take us more time to access the property and actually get proper containment and then address whoever's in the home. And every second counts for us, for sure, in our response and our emergency response to those types of things. So anything we can do to help each other in that regard, I think, is quite important.
Okay. And
Thank you, sir.
One more quick question. In these kinds of cases of break and enters, what are the chances of it happening again, especially since the people are out on bail again? Do they ever return back?
So I think they said earlier that a repeat is not normal, and to take some of the precautions that Project Safeguard may have given you. Any other response?
Yeah, no, I think that it's not normal, but we can never say never in regards to these types of crimes. What we're doing is trying to address it, as I said, holistically. And certainly the platoons, the uniformed platoons that are out there are using the intelligence of where these things have happened to address it. Particularly if it's happened more than once at a certain property, then yes, we look at that as a piece of intelligence as well. But we haven't, and I'll let Ron correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't see a trend towards, duplication of the same house getting hit by those particular groups that we're looking at.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The last question behind you.
Sorry, thank you. Thanks very much for being here this evening. I think policing is a very complex job. I wouldn't want to do it. I'd probably end up behind bars myself, opening my mouth. But I notice in your stats, for your CSI stats for closures, that you're hitting 40%, and some of the others are 30%. So that means you're missing 60 to 70% of the crime. So I'd like to know a two-part question. One for the police is, what type of strategies within the current funding envelope are you employing to increase that even 5 or 10%? And to Councillor Cole, for future funding requests, would you ever consider improving those metrics to actual metrics in terms of success, increasing that rate by even 5 or 10%?
Yeah, so certainly I can start off with that first half. We work very hard to clear as many crimes as we possibly can. I will tell you that a cleared crime for us is a charge and an arrest, and that comes with gathering the sufficient evidence to do so. We build prosecutable cases. Theoretically, we could clear off more and have a higher number at the expense of building weaker cases. Our goal is to build the strongest cases we can to ensure that the cases are ethically conducted, the investigations, and that there's thorough evidence for prosecution. So certainly we strive to continue to clear off as many as we possibly can, but that comes with the focus of actually building strong prosecutable cases. So how could we clear off more? Certainly we always are looking throughout the district for ways of building our capacity through secondment programs and development of our front line. So it will be a goal that we continue on as we would like to get to 50% or higher. But with that comes is the responsibility of ensuring it's done properly.
Now, on the issue of performance-based metrics, I love that question. Thank you for that. Our police board has, for the first time, employed performance-based metrics. So our new strategic plan, which is hopefully going to be approved on February 29th, includes actual demonstrable goals that the service need to meet. And we can juxtapose those against the budget allocations as well. So we are not just going to be, we want to get out of the habit of just throwing money at the problem. We want to actually connect it to real measurable statistics that we share with the public so you can see how your money's being deployed. Ironically, just recently there was a University of Toronto study that was released that downplayed actually denied the connection between extra police funding and crime, that throwing more money at policing doesn't necessarily decrease crime. I mentioned that earlier, that adding police officers doesn't necessarily decrease crime. What it does do is it increases clearance. It increases catching the bad people that are doing the job. But you'll see performance-based metrics being front and center in the management of the police service as of the new strategic planning period, which starts this year, 2024, and goes to 2028. We're trying to put a business perspective on the finances, and we're actually sharing this with our police services across the country.
Thank you for that. For those of you that are still with us online or that are watching this via YouTube, any questions, feel free to send them to ward3@oakville.ca. That will hit both Janet's and my email box. Councillor Knoll, Superintendent, your team, thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting Janet and I in the community. Superintendent, you talked about you don't divulge your secrets. Last Monday night, we were in council very late. I didn't get out of town hall till about 12:15. And driving along Cornwall and coming down Morrison, I picked up an unmarked car. Is it me? Like, is it? Just curious. Thank you for joining us tonight. On behalf of Councillor Knoll, Superintendent and his team, and Councillor Janet and I, we're so fortunate to represent an area such as the one that we call home, an engaged community. We know you come out and ask questions. We appreciate your support, and we're here for a few more minutes until we get thrown out and the door locked. So we don't want any break-in leaves to happen. So we're here for a few minutes. Thanks for coming.